Well, there's a new mountain bike in the Hottie garage, but it doesn't belong to me, Fatty. After struggling up and down the Santa Monica Mountains on a gravel bike, I decided the better option for Mrs. Hottie would be a mountain bike. That bike is carbon, 29er, and it has Shimano components.
Can you borrow it? Of course it has Shimano components. I am building a custom mountain bike myself this year. It's a titanium hardtail by Firefly, built to get me to my 30th finish and beyond. And like Mrs. Hottie's bike, my bike will be decked out in Shimano. For folks building or buying a complete bike, we definitely recommend spec it with Shimano. All the new Leadville-worthy mountain bikes on the market that come with Shimano should have 12-speed shifting, and that means you get what Shimano calls Hyperguide Plus.
Yeah, HG Plus is the update Shimano made to its cassettes and chains to make shifts crisper and faster, even under load. Just imagine you're grinding up a power line inbound and you want to go for an easier gear, but you don't want to ease up on the pedals and the power. HG Plus allows you to make that shift while pushing hard on those pedals.
And HG Plus is not just an XTR or even XT thing. It is part of all levels of 12-speed Shimano. So whether you're a racer like me or someone who's just looking to have a good time or keep up with your partner like Mrs. Hottie, there's a performance shifting Shimano group for you. To check out all levels of 12-speed Shimano mountain bike shifting, head over to bike.shimano.com. And a big kiss to Shimano for being the title sponsor of this show.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race presented by Shimano. It is Season 7, Episode 2 of the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, and freaks you out for the highest, hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country. I'm Michael Hotton, Hottie to most.
And I am Fatty, and we are happy to welcome to the show 2022 Leadville 100 Women's Champ, Hannah Otto. Hannah's been one of the busiest professional bike racers in recent years. She juggles UCI races, the Lifetime Grand Prix, and the occasional FKT.
But this year, Hannah has a new approach, which she shares with us in this episode. She also takes us through her 22 and 23 Leadville races. And while none of us could keep up with Hannah's schedule or her pace up Columbine, we can learn a bunch from how she balances goals and overcomes obstacles.
And here comes Eldon Nelson. With 14 minutes to spare on that clock, the bragging rights and the heavy hardware. That's all you. Welcome back to your Leadville family and your finish line.
It's Fatty's Finishing Tips, our regular segment this season that helps Leadville racers reach the red carpet. Fatty, I don't know how many of these you have in you. I hope it's 2, as this is your second piece of advice.
I'll be honest with you, Hottie. This has become something I think about every single day for way more time than listeners might expect. Maybe it's become a problem. I run each of these tips by the hammer to make sure it's something that is relevant, not just to me, but to others as well. At this point, the list is getting pretty long, and I think they are each something that is going to help people succeed in this race. Now, the one I've got today is crucial to me and has seen me through the completion of this race 25 times. It's also been a major factor in keeping me a pretty positive and happy person most of my adult life. And I can give it to you in 2 easy words: be consistent. I really believe that if you want to finish this race, you need to not just have good power and good skills and good nutrition and good pacing and all of the things that we talk about in the show. You need to have a lot of practice at getting on your bike and just staying on it. And you need to have your practice shifting your mindset so that you do not quit. You need practice at not heeding the excuses that are going to get you off or that will keep you off or get you off your bike. A lot of us have forgotten what endurance means in endurance cycling, but it is just like everything else. You've got to train your body and your brain for endurance. And that means riding consistently. Riding consistently, putting your effort into your legs and lungs, and doing it when you don't feel like it. is the foundation of endurance. And right now, early in the year, it is practice at not giving up. So there are 2 tricks that work for me, and they keep me on the bike 6 days a week, 12 months a year for practically any length of the ride. They are in 2 simple things: make a pact and clear the decks. The first one, the pact part. You've got to make a personal, non-breakable pact with yourself. Luckily, it's at least an easy one. I always do the warm-up. This is wisdom I got from the great Yuri Hauswald. I think he actually told us about this on this show, but it is brilliant. Sometimes you just don't want to ride, right? That happens to all of us. And we're tempted to treat that as actually a good reason to not go out, because we've all heard the listen to your body advice, and that sounds like wisdom, but I think it's easy to misinterpret laziness or inertia or how nice the bed feels at the moment for what you think your body is telling you. So no matter how hard you are feeling like it's just not a great day for a ride, and no matter how anti-riding you are in the moment, no matter how little sleep you got the night before, no matter how busy you are, no matter what you think your body might be telling you, you at least suit up and you do the warm-up for your scheduled ride. If your body is telling you that you are hurting after you've got past that warm-up, then stop. That actually did happen to me a couple of weeks ago when I was getting over the flu. I did a warm-up, felt terrible, got off my bike, didn't feel bad about it. But usually, once I get started, once I've done the hard part of dressing and checking the bike and getting my heart rate past 100, I no longer want to stop. A body at rest tends to stay at rest, but a body in motion tends to get a big endorphin hit and the confidence that comes from the fact that you are learning a little bit about being consistent and self-mastery. So, Hottie, I'm going to guarantee our listeners this: the practice of riding, when you feel like not riding, develops into a skill. And right about at mile 62, after you hit Twin Lakes Dam inbound, and the crowds are now behind you, and you are on that steep uphill pavement and have nothing but climbs and cramps ahead of you, the consistency, the ability to turn off the part of your brain that says, let's not do this, that is going to be very helpful. So the second part of this be consistent tip is to clear the decks. And this is actually something I just figured out recently. No matter if you're riding in the early morning or after you've got the kids down for bed, or during the hour between when you finish your job and start making dinner, it is easier to get started if all you have to do is start. So help yourself the night or day before by prepping your stuff. Put your kit, your socks, your heart rate monitor, your helmet, your shoes, your gloves, all together in a pile. Clean the dried sweat off your glasses, get them, clean and ready to see through. Check your bike, make sure it's ready to go. Then when that window opens and you have time to ride, you don't have to do a scavenger hunt before you do the ride. You just suit up, you get the warm up behind you, you start feeling the endorphins that come with exercise, consistency, and self-discipline. And, you've developed the skill of not giving up. And Hottie, not giving up is a big part of getting to the finish line. So what would you add to this tip?
Well, my perspective all comes from a relatively dry climate year-round. No snow on the ground here in SoCal, so we have a great ability here to ride outdoors all the time. That said, what I would try to look, the weekend rides were never a problem when I was a regular working guy. Not a problem. I loved going out on the weekends and hanging out and riding as far and as long as I could. So that was easy. It's those weekday rides that you're trying to keep into your regular rhythm, especially for working people with kids and a lot on their plate. What I would try to do is combine regular life with riding life or training life. Like going to the gym, I'd go on the bike. Bike commuting was a huge thing I could do, and it meant I got a lot of extra miles in my legs by riding to work a couple times a week. I know, not for everyone. Not everyone has a shower at work. That's a tough one. Shopping by bike. So plan a ride that takes you out an hour, and then on the way back, if you can pick up a few items at the store, because you have to go to the store anyhow. Those are the type of little tricks I would play with myself to make sure that I was being, as Fatty says here, consistent. This is just a guess, but I figure a good number of your finishing tips this season will center around eating and drinking.
It was hard to make some of them not be about eating and drinking. We could do a full episode on that, and that is actually probably a good idea. It's the number one thing to do to get right, and that is why you're going to hear us harp on it a lot. But if you get tired of our voices pitching advice, maybe try checking out the feed. Our friends at the feed have tons of reading material on all manner of fuel and hydration. At thefeed.com, check out their insider section. You'll find a wealth of info on products and strategies there. In fact, kind of like my Fatty's finishing tips, the feed has a top 5 tips for 2024. It is a great place to start, especially the tip on fixing your gut.
That's what we love about the feed. They're not just selling you nutrition and saying, good luck. They also want to help you get it right, which is why they also have a hotline you can call or a live chat you can jump on to get answers. And it's not behind a paywall or anything. It's just something that the feed does for free.
The other way to get info is through their sponsored athletes. Athletes with the feed are always worth a follow as they share nutrition strategies, their tips, how they power through races. So yeah, this show will always focus on how and when to fuel, but there are more voices than ours, and they are definitely worth paying attention to. So check out the feed's tips and info.
If you do make an order with the feed, you can claim your $80 annual credit at thefeed.com/Leadville. Request your email, verify your phone number, then spend your first credit of $20 right away.
Speaking of tips and info, you might be surprised to hear that our clothing partner, DNA Cycling, is also a great resource for going faster. It's something you've heard us preach on this podcast, and having the right setup and clothing can shave minutes off your finishing time.
Well, DNA has put some specifics behind that idea. In their article on how to be aero, DNA notes that 80% of drag is you, or me, or Fatty. You and not the bike are the biggest thing trying to slow you down, especially when you go faster. With that in mind, DNA suggests you take a serious look at what you are wearing.
And that definitely starts with your jersey. DNA's put a lot into making its clothing help you punch a smaller hole in the wind with features like laser cut sleeves, aero collars, aero sleeves, and more. Add to that the overall cut of the race jersey, and that creates a snug yet comfortable fit around your torso. As our friend and aero guru Josh Portner at Silka says, you want to avoid the lumpy, flappy bits in your kit. How do you like my impression of Josh there, Hottie?
C+?
Yeah, you could use some work. Well, regardless of how well I imitate Josh, it is a truth, and that is what a DNA jersey can help you achieve.
Hey, Josh has also pointed out that keeping things clean and smooth is not just for the time trialist going 40 miles per hour. Gains can be found as soon as speeds rise above 12 miles per hour, which you will do at Leadville. Mm-hmm. So check out DNA's article on reducing your drag and then pair that info with a jersey from DNA. And by the way, DNA can also do its high-performing tops in custom. Just go to dnacycling.com to learn more and be sure to tell them the Leadville podcast sent you.
Hannah Otto is on the show, and boy, does she have a Leadville story.
Indeed, we caught up with Hannah as she started her prep for 2024. This is the first of 2 episodes featuring Hannah. In this one, we celebrate all that she has done and hear what it is like to win the Leadville Trail 100.
Hey everyone, in just a few days, I will be headed back to defend my title at the Leadville 100. Here is my equipment check. I will be racing my tried and true Pivot Less SL. So light, it basically floats uphill.
All right, again, we want to welcome to the show Hannah Otto. I got to do my math real quick, Hannah. So last year was 23. So you're the 2022 champion. This is how we do it on the Leadville Trail 100 Mountain Bike Podcast, Hannah. We wait 18, 19 months after you win the race, and then we finally have you on, but we eventually get to it. So sorry about how long this has taken to have you on, but welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited. I think I can comfortably say that Leadville is my favorite race. So I'm really excited to be a part of this podcast.
It's our favorite too. What a surprise.
Yeah. Well, anyone who's followed Hannah probably has their head spinning at times trying to keep up with her because your schedule can be borderline manic. I think you raced all but 1 month in 2023, and it was a mixed bag too for you. You did XCO stuff, marathon XC, UCI races. Of course, you did the Lifetime Grand Prix. So there was a lot on your plate last year, but I understand for 2024, it's kind of a new approach for you.
Yeah. 2024, exactly like you said, I'm taking a new approach. I think you put it very nicely and also very succinctly, which makes it almost sound too easy. It's been a whirlwind for sure. I've been balancing a lot. And that's because I love it so much. I love racing my bike, and I haven't been at a point where I've been willing to quote unquote give anything up. And so the only option I could see for myself was, well, then I will do it all. So exactly, I raced from February all the way to December this last year, everything from 20 minutes to 8 hours, UCI XCO races, UCI marathon races, Lifetime Grand Prix. That of course includes Leadville, capped it off at the La Ruta stage race. It's been a very mixed bag for me. But entering into 2024, I feel like I hit a little bit of a crossroads. And by that, I just mean, I think I've really been balancing these two emotions. One is a love for multiple disciplines. And then the other is this intense love of being the best that I can be. And I feel like I've finally hit a point where maybe doing all of these things is now prohibiting me from being the best that I can be at one of them. And so as, you know, my coach and I sort of sat down to plan through this next year, that's sort of what kept coming up is, okay, how do we make the next step? Well, we focus in. Okay, what does that look like? And so here we are on the other end of many of those conversations. And in 2024, I'll be focusing on the Lifetime Grand Prix and the UCI Marathon World Cups. So I'm going long events. Yep.
You're going to do the long events opposed to the shorter events, which brings up my follow-up question. I know in 2020, you made the Olympic long team. In other words, you were in the running to make the Olympics that year, and Stars and Stripes and representing your country means a lot to most anyone who throws a leg over the bike professionally. So where does that leave you with Paris 2024?
Paris will not be on the table for me, but that doesn't mean I'm done with the Olympic chase. You know, I very much still believe that I can go to the Olympics. It just won't be this year because I have some other things that I have unfinished business with, including Leadville. And, you know, maybe it's a little more backwards than some people do. A lot of people usually go Olympics, then long stuff. I hope to go long stuff and then maybe go to the Olympics in 28. So we'll see how that goes.
A lot of people who race as much and at the level you do burn out hard. You know, I see this all the time. How do you keep from doing that? I mean, this is the question that a lot of our listeners will have. I mean, we get tired, we get, downhearted, we feel like we've done too much, we feel overtrained. It sounds like you never do. It sounds like you always have the energy for what's next. How do you do that?
I feel like I could answer this question, 7 different ways. And on any given day, the answer would be different. And it would also be true. But I think that's part of it is I feel like I'm always approaching the sport from a different angle. I think, even looking at my trajectory from 9 years old until now, I've always done a lot of things. And I think that, I'm 28 and I've had almost a 20-year now, stint in some sort of endurance style event from triathlon to mountain biking. And I think that variety has really kept it fresh for me. My whole life, I feel like I've been being told to dial it back. You're going to burn out. You have to choose. You have to pick. You have to, narrow it down. And I've just always felt within myself, like, if I'm following a love and a desire, how can that burn me out? It just didn't make sense to me. I feel like if you love what you're doing, you're not going to burn out. So just keep checking with yourself. Do I love this? And if the answer is no, what can we do to change that? Maybe it's the terrain you're riding on, the type of intervals you're doing. Maybe you're doing too much with the other responsibilities that you have. But if you keep that love front and center, I think you're good to go.
Hannah has been racing at 20, you said you're 28 going on 29 probably, for almost 20 years now. And she's not even reached 30 yet, because at age 9, she started racing triathlons. And by age 16, you were already a world champ in Xterra, right? So that's an amazing track record already. And somebody who's kept up that is a very busy schedule and succeeded along the way too, which is a 5-time collegiate national champion. You're 2 times a NICA champ, California State NICA champ. So a lot of great stuff has been going on for you already early in your career and currently too. We're going to quickly move towards your Leadville experience, but there's some stuff along the way, right? There's some big things along the way. You mentioned La Ruta, which is how you finished your year. Put a little frosting on top of a very busy 2023. Let's go down to Costa Rica and race from one coast to another through a jungle. As fast as you can, tell us about your experience in La Ruta or at La Ruta.
It was a blast. I mean, every day was so different. And a lot of people like to compare it to Leadville because there is so much climbing, very, very steep climbing. Unlike Leadville, or maybe not for a lot of the amateurs, there's a lot of hike-a-bike, and there's also a ton of mud sections. And so, I mean, I could talk about stories for hours about this race, but I think given that we're on a Leadville podcast, the biggest takeaway I had from it was how valuable gaining experience and perspective can be. Because the very first time I lined up for Leadville, that was my longest mountain bike race ever. And it felt like it went very well, but I felt like a deer in the headlights. I had no idea when the wheels were going to fall off. I didn't trust myself to the extent that I need to in order to perform as a professional athlete. But now, slowly adding these experiences into the bag and racing something like La Ruta, where we do a 7-hour stage as the third stage, I feel like having those things in my back pocket, now when I line up to Leadville and that little voice in the back of your head says, oh my gosh, this is going to be so hard, I can say, yes, it will be, but I've done it before and I've done other hard things too. I'm ready.
Like we said, Hannah had a hell of a career before she even turned age 20. And then, Hannah, you had what you called your breakthrough race at Breck Epic. You were second overall, finished first at stage 6. And then I really first became aware of you the following year, 2020. We were in Oklahoma, Stillwater, where they hold the Mid-South. And the rain dumped on that race. And we had a mud fest. And you finished first. I'll never forget you coming across the finish line. There was this mud caked all of you, but I could see your smile from down the street. I'm like, oh, there she is, and she's going to finish first. So take us through that experience. What did that day, and a lot of people remember this year, that day, that race, because we were just going into COVID and about to get shut down. And what did that race teach you about who you are as an athlete?
Yeah, I think that race really cemented some things for me. Like you said, it was pouring rain. It was very, very muddy. I mean, so much so that the times were nearly doubled. You know, I expected to finish somewhere between 4 and 5 hours, and I finished somewhere between 7 and 8 hours. And, you know, I had no idea that I was in for that on the day, but I do remember in the days leading up to the race, everyone talking about, oh my gosh, it could rain. Oh my gosh, it could be muddy. And I actually have this clip of me doing an interview where I said, the harder the better, let it rain. And I think I've always felt like I'm a very gritty racer. And this really cemented for me that mindset. And that's one reason why I think Leadville is a good race for me, because it is really hard and it is quite different than most other events. And, I definitely don't win every race, far from it, but I do believe that I can outsuffer anybody.
And do you think that was the key at Mid-South? Like you were just able to outlast, outdo, outmud your competitors?
I do. I think that in a lot of these endurance style events, and this is something I've been trying to put into words over the last few years, is it's really, I kind of think of it as putting your mind in a box where there's nothing from the outside can enter that box in the moment. And the only things that you have room for in that box are the task at hand and positivity. And so on that day at the Mid-South, I think the biggest trick was to be entirely present, because there were moments where you're walking in this mud going 1 mile per hour and you have 50 miles left. And if you allow these thoughts to come into your mind, well, at 1 mile per hour with 50 more miles, this isn't looking so good. I mean, if by that math, I would quit too. But I think you really have to be super present of, okay, can I get to the top of this hill? Don't worry about the next 49 miles, just this next thing. And that has been something that I think has really allowed me to conquer some of these super hard challenges, everything from the Mid-South to Leadville to La Ruta. Because in the middle, if you think of the end, I don't even know when I crossed the finish line at some of these events, how in the world I made it. But somehow we do.
Let's talk about the year you won. I love a story. I want to start before the starting line, though. As you got ready for the race, you didn't have an ideal run-up to that race. So tell us a little bit about the context for your Leadville 2022.
Gosh, I feel like we can go weeks back for this follow-up. I raced in the XCO National Championship. I think it was 3 weeks before. And I was sick and I didn't race well. And that was my A race for that year. And I so massively underperformed. It was devastating. And I'm someone who positivity drives me. So for me to openly say that, it's a big deal. I was definitely at a low. And being at that low, I was potentially desperate to try and make up for that in my own mind, in my own way. And so when I showed up to the next 2 World Cups, man, I had a mission. I had something I had to accomplish because I was making up for whatever that was a few weeks earlier. And it looked like I was maybe going to do that at Mount St. Anne. I had the best start of my life, which is usually one of the biggest struggles for me in the XCO racing are the starts. And then I crashed really hard. I landed right on my shoulder, and I didn't know it at the time, but I separated my shoulder. I had a grade 2 AC joint separation. It was very painful. I couldn't lift my arm up above my shoulder. It just felt like one thing after another. But I was in the Grand Prix and I had already skipped Unbound. And at that year, we could only miss 1 race. And so in order to stay in the Grand Prix, I needed to at least start Leadville. And so the whole week before Leadville, that was my only plan is, okay, I'm going to line up, I'm going to start. And if I have to pull out when we hit dirt, I'll pull out when we hit dirt and I'll cruise back to town. And I had doctor's appointment after doctor's appointment that week leading up to the race, with them doing x-rays and different manual muscle tests. And they said, okay, this is what's wrong. And that's about it. And I said, well, what do you mean that's it? And they're like, well, you can rehab it, this, that, and the other. And I said, well, could I race this weekend? And they said, well, you won't make it any worse. So yeah, you can do whatever you want, but it's gonna hurt really bad. And And I heard that you won't make it worse. And I thought, okay, let's give her a try. And so, I mean, that was on Wednesday before Leadville. So I had, 2 days. I was still at home in Salt Lake City, driving back from the doctor on Wednesday. And I called Clayton, my husband, and I said, okay, I've been given the go-ahead. We're going.
I mean, on this short notice, you can't have really acclimated to altitude, right?
No. And I think this ended up being a blessing in disguise. So I think 2 things. The first thing that you just mentioned is the altitude. So I'm a very type A person. So much so that I get in my own way a lot because I like to overthink things, and I always am thinking about how I can do things better. And sometimes when you're in the moment, it's not great to think about how you could have done it better. You just need to embrace what you have. And so a lot of the times, I think when I'm making these decisions about, well, when should I go? How should I acclimate? It's really easy to overthink it. But with this scenario, it was like, well, this is the hand I've been dealt. There is 0 things I can do to change it. So it is what it is, and I'm going to roll with it. So it took some of that stress away. It took some of that overthinking away. And then there are 2 ways to handle altitude from the ideal front. One, you can get somewhere more than 2 weeks ahead of time and try to actually acclimate. Or you can get there less than 24 hours before and try and almost trick your body into not realizing that it's there. So because of this really short notice, I showed up to Leadville the Friday before the race, and I was there for less than 24 hours before starting. And my normal type A self would have never allowed for this because that's just too stressful. What if something goes wrong? What if you can't make it in time? But since this was the hand I was dealt, it forced me to go all in on that plan. And I mean, it worked out really well. And I actually did that again this year in 23. And I plan to continue with that approach to the altitude as well.
That is the altitude part aside, which I definitely, I hear and see more and more racers doing that. Just get there right before the race and don't give yourself time to become exhausted by the altitude before race day. But don't let your type A personality get in the way. That's actually something that has shown up pretty heavily. And I don't know if you've seen these verbatims on our show survey, Hottie, but through 6.5 seasons, several hundred hours of podcasting, our listeners have heard, a couple of pretty type A guys talk about this race for so long. Yes, it is. We've sort of facilitated, perhaps accidentally, letting your mind get in its own way for this race. That sometimes you just got to get to the starting line, turn off your brain, and start turning your legs over, right? I mean, preparation is one thing, and we're obviously big proponents of that. But there does come a moment where it is time to set that aside and trust your preparation and do the race.
So that's the next thing I want to address with this, that I think this injury gave me this secret superpower that I had no idea that I was going to have on that day, which was I lined up with 0 expectation. I mean, we're talking as a professional athlete, you can have, I don't care that much about this event, but you still have an expectation. I had a shoulder that I couldn't reach into my back pocket. I mean, all of my food was on my right side. I couldn't even get to my left one. So I truly had no expectation. And again, as someone who's type A, who I get very nervous before events, it was one of the first times in my entire life that I have stood on a start line not nervous. And it gave me this new perspective because I instead of being so huddled in, focused on myself, I was looking around at the other professional women. And one of them was actually crying. And I turned to her and I asked her what was wrong. And she said, "I'm just so nervous." And it really struck me because I think that's where a lot of us are. on that start line. We desire it so much, and we've all put so much into it, and it can be very overwhelming. And I had this gift that I wasn't nervous. I had no expectation, and I raced that way. I raced totally free. I surrendered the control of the race. I just let the race unfold. And it's hard to get that exact thing again because they're short of another injury. People laughed like, oh, you won last year. What are you going to do again this year? And it's like, short of injuring myself again, I will never recreate this exact circumstance. But it was a huge life lesson for me of how powerful it is to put in the work ahead of time. But then when you get to the start line, let go. Because I think we're getting in our own ways more often than not.
We want to give a big congrats to our friends at Envy. The best carbon component maker is expanding its presence in the pro peloton. Envy has been the wheels under the United Arab Emirates team, and now Envy will have complete bikes competing on the world's biggest cycling stage.
Now, Team Total Energies will be on board Envy bikes this season, and the bike they will mostly ride is the Melee. This is the same bike you've seen in the Lifetime Grand Prix with Alexi Vermeulen riding it to some gravel races and some wins. I mean, now Envy has the Mog, which has more tire clearance, but Alexi has raced and won on the Melee, and now that bike will be in the Pro Peloton.
Yeah, it is a perfect bike for Paris-Roubaix. So you may want to be asking yourself this question. Why does this matter to me? I'm racing the Leadville 100. Well, having top pros on Envy products in competitive and trying conditions is amazing R&D, and it has a trickle-down effect on everything Envy does. Sponsored riders provide feedback that helps Envy engineers create new and better products.
So we look forward to seeing more Envy products being ridden at the highest level. And like Team Total Energies, you too can ride a Melee. Check out that bike and all your carbon components needs at Envy, that's ENVE.com. Okay, back on course with 2022 Leadville champ, Hannah Otto. We know you made it past the dirt. You were just hoping to make it to the dirt. We know you made it well past the dirt. In fact, you were with a good group as you folks headed up Keevens. Alexis Scarda animated the race early on, and she took off. But you were with a group of 5, including the defending champ, Rose Grant. Sophia is there with you as well. Sarah Sturm, yourself. So a good group as you folks head up and over Keevens, and then up Sugarloaf as well. What I want to know, too, was with the question mark surrounding your shoulder, as you start pointing your bike downhill, especially that upper part of power line, what did you do to try and offset the injury, try to at least nurse your way down the steep descent of power line, the top of power line?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me in this race was on the descents, I completely separated myself from others. So a lot of the times in the pro fields, we're going to ride inches off of each other's wheels because you literally don't want to give an inch. But for me, some of those really sharp movements, I didn't have the strength in my shoulder where if I got too far over the bars that I could actually pull myself back and recenter. So if I got in a position where I was stopping fast, I was just going over the bars. And so on that descent, I pretty much just let everyone go. I did not get to the bottom of power line in the group, but I was close enough that I could put in an effort to reattach myself. And that's exactly what happened. And actually, when I got to that group, Rose looked at me and said, well, the hardest part is over. She's suffered her fair share of shoulder injuries, and Rose is just an incredible person. So I think she very much knew what I was going through that day.
Were you wearing a brace or anything? Anything to help you out? KT tape? Or...
Yeah, I had it taped up with some pretty intense tape. It was sort of pulled up over towards my neck so that the tape was actually holding it in place.
So you hit the bottom of power line, and I think Sophia gets a gap here. So the group is starting to fragment a little bit. At what point do you realize, or have you realized by now, I'm in this thing?
No, still not yet. I was still just enjoying the ride. And I think again, something very unique to Leadville is that the longer you can stay calm, the better off you are. And so I think a lot of the time, again, as pros, as type A people with these strong desires, we're trying to read the race from mile one. How do I feel? How do others feel? Where am I positioned? At this point, I'm just floating along in the group. And it wasn't until we reached the bottom of Columbine that I felt like the race was really starting. In the year before, I had noticed in the year before where I took fourth that the person who reached Columbine in fifth finished first, and the person who reached Columbine in first finished fifth. And so I knew that Columbine was really the start of this race. And so I didn't have many concerns prior to that. And I wasn't overly excited either, because I knew when I reached Columbine, all of this could unravel, or not, the positivity, right? But I'm not getting overly excited. When we reached Columbine, Sarah and I were together, and she set a pretty hot pace up the climb, actually, and I matched it for quite a while. Looking down at my power meter, I finally said to myself, okay, this pace is unsustainable. I'm going to hold it to the next corner, and then I'll let her go if it still is going. And when we reached the next corner, I actually looked back, and she had completely fallen off. So that was the moment where I thought, oh, okay, it's a good day. Because now I'm in second. I am now getting this massive just like infusion of excitement and joy, because I was fourth the year before. Here I am in second. I've, bettered my placement. I'm looking at a Leadville podium. Now I'm just riding for joy. And we reach the goat trails, and I all of a sudden see Alexis's national championship jersey up ahead, because she was the marathon national champion. And I felt like my jaw just hit the ground, because someone had told me at the bottom that she was 3 minutes ahead of me. And so just seeing her on that climb, I realized it's not about catching her right now. It's about the fact that I'm moving significantly faster to have put 3 minutes into her across this hour 10 climb. And I caught up to her by the top. We started to descend together. I once again let a significant gap open on this descent due to my shoulder. But I knew, well, if I've put in 3 minutes in this climb, I'm not worried about 1 minute on the descent. So I caught up to her, and I thought, okay, we're going to work together, and I'm going to secure a first or second place at Leadville. And as we began to rotate, I was watching my power, and I was noticing that her poles were significantly lower power and speed than mine. And it became apparent that I was feeling, for whatever reason, a lot better at this moment in time. And so I really had two options. Option one was stay with her and utilize her poles in any way I could, which would be sort of the safe move, because anyone who's raced Leadville knows that Pipeline is a long, flat section, and it's lonely if you don't have someone to work with. But I then asked myself a question, which was, well, if you stay with her, do you think this is the winning pace, or are you going to get caught? Because right now you're first and second, but if this isn't the winning pace, for all you know, you could get caught by 10 people and then not. And so I felt like I had to go for broke. And so I increased the pace a bit and went off on my own with about 30 miles to the finish.
And before you take us to the finish, for the folks keeping score here, in addition to catching Alexis, we had Sarah Sturm. Sarah told us after the race, Hannah, that she actually ran into some GI issues going up Columbine, and that forced her to back off as well. In addition, she had a cow coming home. Crazy day for Sarah. Sophia, I think, had her own issues physically going up the hill, and she ended up giving a wheel to a teammate. So that puts her out of the game. That leaves Alexis and Rose Grant, the defending champion, the queen of pacing, out there, and then yourself, of course, playing for all the marbles here. So, okay, sorry to interrupt there, but that's for the folks keeping score. That's what's happened to the women's field in 2022. Now we are approaching the beast of beasts, which is Powerline. You're out there on the pipeline section, trying to figure out, right, what's my next move? What am I going to do? You feel like you can gap Alexis, but Rose, right, is back there somewhere.
And like you said, the queen of pacing. I mean, I think every time Rose has won Leadville, which here every time Rose has won Leadville, meaning she's won it more than once, she, I believe, has won it on Powerline or after. She really knows how to pace this race. And so I knew she was far from being out of the equation. And I still had 30 miles to go. That's quite a ways. But now I'm leading Leadville, and I'm experiencing all of the emotions that go with it. So first, from an intellectual point, I'm thinking, okay, what's the move? How am I pacing these last 30 miles? And my first thought is, okay, well, I know the power I held up Columbine. And I know that 1 got me a gap and 2 allowed me to catch Alexis. So it stands to reason that if I can hold that same power to the finish, it's unlikely that someone will suddenly best that because they haven't to this point. So that's the first thing, is I set the dial to that pace, the power that I held up Columbine. And now that that's out of the way, I'm dealing with the mental and emotional aspect, which is every time I have the thought, you could win Leadville, I just feel like I might cry out of excitement and joy and everything else. So I'm trying to work through this. I actually, when I hit the pipeline aid station in first, my husband was there as a part of my pit crew. And to this day, we joke because I couldn't look at him, because I knew if I made eye contact with him, I would burst out crying out of excitement. So I just stared the opposite direction as he gave me my food and water and everything else, and then went on my way. I could not say a word. But what kept me focused and calm was, again, staying in the moment. And the thing I kept repeating to myself is, you are experiencing what it feels like to be winning Leadville at mile 80. I wonder what it feels like at mile 85. And I was breaking down these small experiences. I wasn't focused. Of course I wanted to win, but when I thought that far ahead, it was an overwhelming experience mentally, emotionally, physically. But when I could think about what I was experiencing, harness the power of that excitement, because I'm definitely getting a massive adrenaline rush from this excitement. So harnessing the power of that and using it towards something small and tangible, like the next 5 miles, I feel like that really allowed me to get the best out of myself every mile to the finish.
Obviously, the three of us, all of us, I mean, we've made a show out of this race that you prepare maniacally for, and then you experience at a completely different level, sometimes mental, definitely emotional.
All right, we're closing in on the boulevard. You're leading, and the reality of winning is sinking in. Couple things here. How's the shoulder doing? And 2, do you have any idea where Rose is?
I have absolutely no idea where Rose is. So I am riding just like my life depends on it. I remember on my bike computer, I have a setting that's distance to go. And so it was like 5 miles, 4.9, 4.8. And I was just staring at that, what felt like in an all-out sprint. Talking about nutrition, I was eating from fear because I remember thinking, I will not lose this race from a bonk. So I actually took my final nutrition on the boulevard because I was like, I don't know what's going to happen here, but I need all the calories. And yeah, it wasn't until after that, there's that final rise, that little descent, and I looked back and I saw no one, and it was an overwhelmingly joyful moment. And I think the funniest thought that I had in that moment is I can't lift my arm up to post up. So you'll see all my photos are just, I'm sitting straight up with one arm by my side and just the right arm lifted up.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the one time you had to keep one hand on the bars, right, to get things across. Not bad though. Great. I mean, a terrific ride. I remember being at the finish line, hearing a lot of other racers, your peers, saying how happy they were for you.
Oh, that's
they
really
were
nice.
volunteering that. There were other people who wanted to win that race badly, including Rose. But she said she was really, really happy to see you. If she was going to lose, she said, I'm happy it was to Hannah.
That's really nice.
You did put up, I think it was 5 minutes into Rose, in fact. Yeah, 5.5 minutes over Rose was your finishing touch there. So, yeah, a beautiful, beautiful day for you. A very happy one. You returned, of course, this past year, 2023, beat your time by, do quick math here, 5 minutes. So you finished with a 7:19 in 2023. I remember seeing you at the finish there. Obviously not as happy as you were in 2022. I sensed a little disappointment, but what do you think the big differences were there between winning and the fourth place you got in 23?
I had won in 22, and I had won in a manner where, like many people came to me and said, well, you won, so you know the recipe for success. How will you replicate? And in some ways, that was a really difficult question because I couldn't replicate it. I mean, short of getting injured, how do you replicate the race that I had? And a race where I had no expectations. I'm now coming in with potentially the highest expectations of everybody on that start line. And I had to really take a lot of time leading up to the race, remembering the lessons that I had learned the year before of these expectations are not what is going to drive you to another successful race. And so I really had to step into what doesn't feel overwhelming, what feels like, rather than the outcome goal of finishing first, what's a performance goal? What's a power number? What are these things that I can control that will leave me feeling satisfied and potentially, still giving me the chance to win? And so I landed on, I want to beat my time. If my time won in 2022 by over 5 minutes, I said in interviews leading up to the race, if I can beat that time and someone else beats me, good for them. And I stand by that. Good for them. It means that the ante is upped for next year, but good for them. And so that is how I attacked the race. I had a very specific plan in order to beat my time. I had very specific pacing, and it started a lot faster than I think most people anticipated, and largely because Keegan was out to set the record. And I had about 30 seconds after the gun went off to decide, am I going to go with that or am I going to stick to the plan? And I have no regrets for that race day. I think, like we just talked about, sticking with the plan is the right thing 99% of the time. And that's what I did. And that's why I beat my time. I wonder what would have happened if I'd gone out faster. And that comes from the fact that when you go back and I look at the power numbers from, say, Sophia, who won the race, we have very similar overarching power, but we put it out in very different places throughout the race. So she put out a lot of power at the start. I did not. We put out really similar power in the middle, and then I bested her power at the end. I actually set the fastest time for those final 10 miles of the race ever, which was cool to see on Strava. So I definitely back halved that race. But the tricky thing is for the pro field, and particularly for the women, is you start up these climbs, which it's a good idea to pace, but then you hit pipeline. And if you're in a pack of very fast men, you can kind of float in that pack. and go the same speed as, say, someone who has a less strong pack or rather a pack less willing to work together. And I think that's a lot of what happened to give maybe that some of that separation at the start.
So 2024, I'd love to have you get out your crystal ball, but honestly, that may not even be possible. But maybe you can get out your crystal ball for one thing that is going to be different, and that is the starting line. You are going to be with a group of just women at that starting line. That's going to be brand new. How do you think you're going to handle that differently?
I'm super excited about it for a lot of reasons. I think that the women's field gets really confusing at the start as the men sort of all come around us. I usually don't know what place I'm in until I hit the first feed zone at Pipeline and someone tells me, because it just becomes such a mishmash of people, and other women can, inadvertently sneak around you and you won't even know because they're mixed in with all the men. So I'm really excited to have this opportunity where it feels like nobody's sneaking away this time. Anyone who wants to get that gap is certainly going to have to earn it. I'm very curious how the tactics will play out. I think a lot of it's going to depend on if anyone has any secret ambitions time-wise and they know that they have to start hard. Otherwise, I imagine that no one's really going to want to work off that start line. It starts pretty flat, even downhill. It's early. It kind of lends itself to just rolling out of town. But I think also the slower it starts, sometimes the harder it hits when we do go hard. So I imagine that the St. Kevin's climb may be harder than ever as women try and break up the pack.
Oh, it's going to be an exciting year. I'm excited to see how you do. Hannah, wow, great storytelling and some amazing advice.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Hannah Otto. We are not done with her. We will have her on a future episode and ask her for some free coaching. We will be getting specifics from Hannah and what she does for Leadville and what advice she has for us. That'll be fun.
Yep, Hannah has got the goods. In addition to being fast, she has health science degrees and coaching certifications, and she is terrific at sharing information. We're not the only ones who think that. Hannah's a regular on the Trainer Road podcast, where she helps others achieve their race goals.
Yeah. Now, our Slack channel conversations are picking up again. So get on over there and find or start a discussion. Get your Leadville racing and training plans going. Check it out at leadville.fm/Slack. And if you like the show, go wherever you listen, give us a 5-star rating, write us a review. And to see all the ways you can do that, go to leadville.fm.
And breaking news here, our show is now on YouTube. You can get to our show there by going to leadville.fm/YouTube. The entire catalog now on YouTube. Pretty cool. Good luck in your Leadville planning and training. Thanks for listening, and we will see you at the starting line.
And be consistent.